My name's Mark, I'm the game director on Ghost Rider. I'm going to show you now some footage from the game, from the very first couple of weeks of development, all the way through to the present day. So, here we go. So, what you're looking at here is like 1 week into Ghost Rider production, where we're literally getting the very first bike physics handling up and running, and some really early bike rider combat. Here we're just experimenting with what might work from a gameplay perspective. We've got really early AI guys on bikes trying to work out how we can get them to react to the small input changes that a player can make. Here you can see we've got a track set out with various different kind of jump sizes, so you can see the jump distances are different. We're experimenting with what works, trying how a double jump might work in the game and what sort of distances would feel cool. Here you can see we've got very early combat and player character movement. You can see it's a really early iteration of Ghost Rider. He's looking really like a beanpole. The fire in his head is really not working. It's not looking very good. This character went through about 5 different iterations before the final game. You see really early combat here, sort of early aerial moves. There's no weapon trails or special effects on the character. Literally, we're just trying to work out how to detect collisions, how to make the AI work. You can see here really early hard, and now we're starting to layer in some special effects. This is about a month or so into the project. You've got some really early demon essence being picked up and some early weapon trails on the character. So all of this stuff has been improved over the course of the game. So what you'll see later in the movie is how the game looks now in comparison to this. So you can see that early essence being picked up there. This is an example of a grey box track. The level designers, develop the levels as grey box arenas. A grey box meaning without textures, and they're then sent to the artist to be worked up and textures added. Here's more combat. You can see more special effects being layered in now, trying to work out what works. There's kind of death effects for the enemies, and the ability to be able to knock enemies into the air and juggle them in the air in the early days. You know, slightly better aerial combat, slightly better fire on Ghost Rider's head. Even Ghost Rider's looking slightly better now as well. Here you can see the environment itself is starting to get better. So we've got special effects, you know, shadows and textures on floors, making it more detailed. Here's an example of a grey box foot environment, where these environments are giving to the artists to be textured up and all the detail added later. The arrows indicating where to go for the artists, so they know to highlight those doors for the player with lighting, so the player knows which direction to head in the game. Here you can see the grey box transition through to an environment that is not a complete environment yet, and you'll see better versions of these later in the game. The blue textures there on Ghost Rider we had to change. Marvel didn't like the use of blue there. They didn't feel it was in keeping with Ghost Rider, so we were asked to change it to the red that's in the final game. Here this is Ghost Town bike level being played, still quite early days. You can see a lot of bugs there that have been ironed out. Here's version of the carnival. There's a lot of special effects and detail missing from this level that appears in the final game. The sky isn't there, and the lack of bloom as well. So although it's starting to look a little bit nicer now and starting to look more like a proper game, we're still actually only about 6 months in development here, and there's a hell of a lot more polish needed to be added to make it final. You can see here a more final version of that same level with effects, sky in the background, and there's a bloom filter making the whole thing look special. Here's a good example of the grey box turning into an early version of the level and turning into the final version of that bar. It looks a lot more detail and shadows and moving shadows added to that level. Again here, the big wheel you can see lacks detail, and then, you know, special effects, sky and bloom added makes the whole thing look really special. This is where we started to add cinematic moments into the game to introduce enemies to the player, so new enemies are introduced in cool ways. Loads of animated environment objects in this room. All this stuff was layered in in kind of the last 4 months of development. This whole train sequence was a lot of fun to develop. Here you can see the levels and the bike physics. In its early days, very awkward to handle bike, which we spent a lot of time polishing to make the bike easier to handle in these kind of difficult and complex sort of situations with enemies. We also did quite a bit to make the enemies themselves more visible, adding glows to them too. We added track symbols as well. You can see the arrows there that help guide the player around the track, so it was a bit easier for the player just to subconsciously know which direction to go. Arrows to help you indicate the power downs as well. Okay, this is a fairly early version of Wallow. It was our water elemental. You see in the final game this is changed to this kind of techno Wallow that teleports and fires these huge beams of electricity at the player. We felt that the character needed complete rework, and we're really pleased with the final result, the teleporting. Thanks for watching. Hope that's given you an insight into what it takes to make a game like Ghost Rider. Hope you've enjoyed playing it as much as we've enjoyed making it.